Welcome to Space Drift, please subscribe. In a stunning and unexpected move, the Supreme Court has stepped in to halt President Trump's sweeping new tariff plan, sending shockwaves not only through Washington but also reverberating across the global economy. The decision has left lawmakers, business leaders, and everyday Americans scrambling to understand what comes next. The announcement triggered immediate reactions on Capitol Hill and in financial markets worldwide, as investors and officials tried to gauge the impact of this unprecedented intervention. The Supreme Court's decision, delivered on August 13, 2025, represents a major check on presidential power and throws the future of American trade policy into deep uncertainty. For many, it marks a turning point in the ongoing debate over the limits of executive authority. At the heart of the case lies a fundamental constitutional question. Who truly has the authority to set tariffs? The president, acting alone, or Congress, as the nation's legislative body? This issue has sparked fierce debate among legal scholars and politicians alike. President Trump invoked a rarely used 1970s law to justify imposing a sweeping 10% tariff on nearly all imports, claiming the nation faced an economic emergency that demanded immediate action. The move was bold, but also controversial. Critics, including many in Congress and the business community, argued that he overstepped his authority, bypassing Congress's constitutional power to tax and regulate commerce. They warned that such unilateral action could set a dangerous precedent for future presidents. The Supreme Court's stay signals deep concern about this potential executive overreach and highlights the justice's willingness to intervene in matters of national economic policy when constitutional boundaries are at stake. For now, the tariffs are paused, offering much-needed relief to importers, small businesses, and consumers who have been bracing for rising costs and economic uncertainty. But the legal battle is far from over. The court will soon decide whether the president's actions were lawful, and their ruling could have far-reaching consequences for the balance of power in Washington. The world is watching closely, as the outcome of this case will not only define the limits of presidential power, but also reshape the future of American trade and its role in the global economy for years to come. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the nation now waits anxiously for the Supreme Court's final word. To understand this crisis, let's break down tariffs and why they became such a hot topic during the Trump administration. Tariffs have been around for centuries, but their impact on modern economies is more complex than ever. A tariff is simply a tax on imported goods, making them more expensive for consumers. When you buy something made overseas, a tariff can add to its price, sometimes by a little, sometimes by a lot. Governments use tariffs to raise revenue or protect domestic industries from foreign competition. By making imported goods pricier, they hope to give local businesses a better chance to compete and grow. President Trump has long championed tariffs as a way to protect American jobs and manufacturing. He made tariffs a centerpiece of his economic policy, promising to bring back factories and revive struggling towns. He argues that foreign countries undercut U.S. industries with cheap goods, hurting American workers. Many American factories have closed or downsized, and Trump blamed unfair trade for these losses. By taxing imports, Trump hoped to encourage Americans to buy domestic products, boosting U.S. factories. The idea was to make American-made goods more attractive and keep jobs at home. Another motivation, addressing the trade deficit, which is the difference between what the U.S. imports and exports. The U.S. imports far more than it exports, a gap Trump sees as economic weakness. He argued that this imbalance meant lost jobs and lost wealth for the country. He believed tariffs would pressure other countries to lower their own trade barriers and buy more American goods. In Trump's view, tariffs were a tool to force fairer deals and open up foreign markets. Tariffs, in Trump's view, were both a shield and a bargaining chip, central to his America First agenda. He saw them as a way to defend American interests and negotiate from a position of strength. He wanted to move away from broad trade deals, favoring one-on-one negotiations where tariffs could be used as leverage. This approach marked a sharp break from decades of U.S. trade policy. The plan was to disrupt the global trade system and force better terms for American workers. Trump's strategy was to shake up the status quo and demand new rules that he believed would benefit the U.S. supporters saw this as a bold stand. Critics warned it would backfire. Some praised the tough stance, while others feared higher prices and trade wars. The result, a dramatic escalation in trade tensions and a legal showdown over presidential authority. The world watched as the U.S. and its trading partners imposed new tariffs and countermeasures. Tariffs became the flashpoint in a much larger debate about America's role in the world economy. The ripple effects were felt by businesses, workers, and consumers everywhere. And now, the Supreme Court is at the center of that debate, poised to decide how much power the president really has over trade and the future of American economic policy. President Trump's approach was unprecedented. He was willing to test the boundaries of presidential power in a way few leaders had before. His decision would spark a fierce debate about the limits of executive authority and the role of Congress in shaping economic policy. Instead of working through Congress, Trump bypassed lawmakers entirely and invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods. IEEPA was originally crafted for targeted sanctions during genuine national security crises, such as threats from hostile nations or terrorist organizations, not for broad economic maneuvering. But Trump's team argued that decades of persistent trade deficits had weakened America's economic standing and, by extension, its national security, making emergency action not just justified, but necessary. This interpretation allowed the president to slap a 10% tariff on nearly all imports, effectively transforming a law meant for rare emergencies into a powerful tool for sweeping economic change that affected millions of businesses and consumers. The administration insisted that the president had broad discretion to define what constituted a threat and to act unilaterally, without waiting for congressional approval or oversight. Critics, however, called this a dangerous legal stretch, arguing that a long-standing trade deficit hardly qualified as a sudden or unforeseen emergency. They warned that such a move could set a precedent for future presidents to bypass Congress whenever they saw fit. Lawsuits quickly followed, with opponents claiming Trump was sidestepping Congress's constitutional authority over tariffs and undermining the delicate balance of powers at the heart of American democracy. The courts were now tasked with answering a fundamental question: could a president truly use emergency powers to enact major economic policy without congressional approval? Or was this a clear overreach? The stage was set for a historic constitutional showdown, one that would test the very foundations of American government. Ultimately, it would be up to the Supreme Court to decide where the line should be drawn, and their ruling would shape the balance of power for years to come. The tariff plan split the nation. Supporters, especially in manufacturing, saw tariffs as a way to revive American industry and protect jobs from unfair foreign competition. They argued a strong domestic manufacturing base was vital for both economic and national security. Opponents, businesses, farmers, and consumer groups, warned tariffs would raise costs, disrupt supply chains, and spark trade wars. Farmers feared retaliation would devastate exports, while consumer advocates said higher prices would hit families hardest. The debate was fierce, with both sides convinced the future of the American economy was at stake. The legal fight centered on the Constitution's clear grant of tariff-setting power to Congress. For centuries, Congress has written trade laws and set import taxes. The president enforces them. Trump's use of IEEPA to impose tariffs was seen as an attempt to bypass this system. Critics warned this would set a dangerous precedent, shifting a core legislative power to the executive. Lower courts were skeptical, with one judge noting tariff doesn't even appear in IEEPA's text. The key question: can a decades-old trade deficit be declared an emergency justifying presidential action? The Supreme Court now faced the task of clarifying the limits of executive power in trade. The outcome would redefine the balance between Congress and the White House. While Trump's tariffs were in effect, Americans felt the impact fast. Prices on everyday goods rose as companies passed new import taxes onto consumers. Inflation ticked up, with key price indexes climbing noticeably. Job growth slowed, as businesses faced uncertainty and hesitated to hire or invest. Ironically, the trade deficit kept growing. Tariffs didn't reverse the trend. Some companies rushed imports before tariffs hit, inflating short-term numbers. Retaliatory tariffs from other countries hurt U.S. exports, especially in agriculture. Supply chains were thrown into chaos and businesses struggled to plan for the future. The administration's unpredictable use of emergency powers, like a sudden 50% tariff on Brazil, added to the turmoil. The result: economic disruption, rising costs, and growing anxiety for families and companies. The country was left questioning whether the promised benefits were worth the pain. The Supreme Court stay is only temporary. The real battle is just beginning. The justices will hear arguments and issue a final ruling on whether the president can use IEEPA for tariffs. In the meantime, businesses get relief as tariffs are paused, but uncertainty remains. Billions in collected tariffs could be refunded if the court rules against the president. A loss for Trump would force future administrations to work within stricter trade laws and with Congress. A win would vastly expand presidential power, letting future presidents set trade policy by emergency decree. Either way, the decision will reshape the balance of power in Washington. The nation and the world awaits the verdict. This Supreme Court case is about more than tariffs. It's about the future of American government. A ruling against the president would reaffirm Congress's authority and check executive overreach. It would force presidents to negotiate major economic policies with lawmakers, strengthening democracy. A ruling for the president would grant sweeping new powers, letting future leaders act unilaterally in economic crises. The stakes: stability versus unpredictability, checks and balances versus executive action. However the court rules, this case will define the boundaries of presidential power for generations. The outcome will echo through every future debate over America's place in the world economy.